Hi, everybody. I'm Vic Mignogna, and welcome to my nerd cave. Come on in. Everybody has a passion for something. Everybody. I mean, could be NASCAR, could be sports. For me, since I was 9, it was Star Trek and Star Wars as well, but mainly Star Trek. So I have the great privilege to have this room that I just recently finished. That is my collectible room, memorabilia room. And I've been told that maybe a lot of you guys might be interested in some of the pieces that are here. So we're going to do a little tour, and I'm going to share some of my passions with you. These pieces up on this shelf are pieces from Captain Kirk's quarters. Now, a lot of these pieces were recreations because, of course, the originals were from many years ago, for Star Trek Continues, my web series. This piece, 3D printed. This piece, 3D printed. But what's really special is we didn't really know exactly what this looked like. So we did our best to model it and 3D print it for Star Trek Continues. And then we found the real piece. This is exactly what was used in the original series. You see, we got pretty close. Over here, if you're I Dream of Jeannie fans, you'll recognize this bottle. This bottle was given to me by Barbara Eden herself. We were at an event in Australia, and she was selling bottles at her table. She offered me one, and of course, I humbly accepted. A fun story about this little lantern. I was at the Middle East Film and Comic-Con with Bill Shatner, and we went out to dinner one night out in the desert to this restaurant. And in front of the restaurant was kind of a bazaar of vendors, all selling all kinds of different little trinkets. And there was a man selling these very interesting little ornate lanterns. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to ask Bill to pick one. So I said, hey, Bill, come here a second. Which of these do you like best? And he pointed to this one. So I bought it, and we put this and the genie lamp in Captain Kirk's quarters in Star Trek Continues, because why not? This mirror was in Captain Kirk's quarters, and I made this mirror. I built it as best I knew how based on screen caps and stuff, but I didn't really know, nobody really knew exactly what it looked like until my good friend William Smith found some high-res screen captures, and they 3D printed this. This is exactly what it looked like, and this was my best, my best guess in building it. I made this shield for one of our episodes of Star Trek Continues, our mirror episode, several of those pieces. And then if you look down on this shelf, you see a lot of awesome phasers. These are all phasers from my series. This would be a hero version. And for those of you that don't know, hero versions of props were very, very finely detailed and finished off so that they could be close-up shot, right? But if you don't need a close-up shot, you can get away with a stunt prop. This is literally a resin cast version of the hero props. And look, from just 5 or 6 feet away, it looks like the other one. We had a lot of our security guys using those. And then we've got several different hero phasers, stunt phasers. If you're a Star Trek fan, you recognize this black and white phaser from early on. Something special about this one. When I was 13 years old, I bought a phaser that was supposed to be used in Star Trek Phase 2, which was a planned new series for Star Trek. They were going to bring the series back and make a continuation. At the last minute, they decided to make the movies. They made Star Trek the Motion Picture. But they hired a man named Brad Nelson to redesign the phasers for Star Trek Phase 2. That's what they were going to call the series. And when they decided not to do the series, they sold the phasers. And I bought one, $75. Way back then, it was a lot of money for a little kid. And I took it to school. You know where this is going, don't you? I took it to school to show my friends. And then we were all going to go to lunch. And so I thought, well, I don't want to carry this to lunch. So I went into the theater department and I put it in a drawer in the men's dressing room. And when I came back, it was gone. And I always mourned the loss of that phaser. And then at the convention, big Star Trek convention in Vegas years ago, there was a prop man who had built prop replicas of the Brad Nelson phaser. And of course, I had to get one for old time's sake. Several of these other pieces, if you've seen Star Trek Continues, you'll recognize this from our 8th episode. And these cool little pieces my buddy Jeff built for our 6th episode, and they're actually functional. The cast would wear them on their arm, and whenever they were feeling themselves getting more and more angry, they could turn the dial up and dial up the intensity of these armbands that were meant to block these anger rays that were coming through the ship. Table viewer. Now this is special. This is the most accurate, perfect replica of a communicator you will ever see. Why is that, Vic? I'm glad you asked. Because in the original series, they had several stunt communicators and phasers, right, for long distance shot. But they had one really nice hero communicator for close-ups. Now, what made this the hero communicator? I'm going to show you. If you look underneath, you see there's this little brass tube. You see that? What's inside here is a Russian pocket watch. And when you would stick a screwdriver in here to wind it, and then you turn it on, can you see that? The center dial spins, making it look like it actually works. Is that cool? Sorry, that is too cool. So that is a perfect replica of the hero communicator. I found this 1973 program. Let's not do the math and figure out how old I was then. But then, of course, that's kind of a giveaway right there. Now, this piece is very special to me, and it has a sweet story, too. This is from my favorite episode, Requiem for Methuselah. It's the handheld device that Mr. Flint used to control the Enterprise. The original one of these came up for auction with the Greg Jean auction. Greg Jean had amazing collections of all original props from the series. And I decided this was the only thing I could afford to bid on, so I bid on it. And one guy outbid me. I was in the car and I couldn't bid again. And one guy topped me and I lost it. But my dear friend and brother, Dave Arland, gave me a replica as a way to assuage my sorrow, I guess, for not getting the original. My friend Jeff built a replica of this because it was in Captain Kirk's quarters, and so we needed it when we were building the sets for Star Trek Continues. But again, we really didn't know what it looked like. Jeff did a great job approximating it. This, however, is actually what was there. My friend Roger Romage found these. They're in Great Britain. They were bread boxes. The inside of this is porcelain. And this is exactly what was in Captain Kirk's quarters, just like that globe statue over there. As we move down here, you'll notice this was a 3D print of a replica piece that was in Spock's quarters. When we did our 10th and 11th episodes, we needed Spock's quarters. And so we had to get all the details for his quarters. And my friend Randy, who 3D printed this and this also, 3D printed this. I made this piece, which you'll recognize from the original series, from the episode where Spock had to go and marry his betrothed. Some pieces from our series, the turbo lift, this beautiful lamp was also in Spock's quarters. These are the wand replicas, which are probably the most accurate mass-produced replicas of the phaser and communicator. If you look down here, though, these are master replicas versions of the same ones. And they're great, but they're just not quite right. Like, look at this. Look at the difference. See how much fatter this is? And it's kind of flat as opposed to a little bit of different finish. So the wand really did it well. And for those of you that know, Wanda's coming out with a tricorder to complete the set. These pieces I put in here because they were sitting on John Delancey's table in our council room set in our 9th episode. This is the layout of our studio. This is an actual photograph of our studio from overhead. So you can see exactly what we built for the series. Someone made this for me. I had one of these when I was a little boy, and somebody made a Star Trek Continues version. And apparently they took the head off somebody, I don't know who, and stuck it on there, which is kind of fun. This is a Klingon hero blaster, and then this one is a stunt version of the blaster. If you saw our series, you would recognize this clay maquette that Greg Dykstra built, created, designed, and built as this was Usti. This was a creature that broke into the ship, about an 8-foot tall creature. And this was a model of what he was going to do with the design details of the character. And this, of course, from our 5th episode, the Civil War episode. Now, what's really special about this room is that it's big enough that I could actually display the uniforms that I wore in the series. So here, my favorite, the green V-neck. This is exactly the fabric. It's a wool double knit. And if you do any kind of sewing or seamstress work, you would know that wool double knit is not very easy to find these days, much less that color. So I love this uniform. The standard one, of course, exactly the same fabric that they used in the original series. And this baby is the captain's chair from Star Trek Continues. I took it off the bridge when we finished our series. Some of you may not know, the original series of Star Trek was really, really struggling to save money. And the best way to save money is to use things that already exist. Don't reinvent the wheel, just use a wheel and put a couple of things on it, paint it a different color, and suddenly it's something different. This is no exception. This chair, the actual chair itself, is a Madison office chair. It was made by a company called Madison back in the 60s. And all they did was buy a chair and then built this cradle around it, put a couple of lights and buttons and switches on it, and suddenly it's a captain's chair of the future. So I'm very, very proud. My good friend Ralph Miller, who was our sound supervisor on Star Trek Continues, actually did the reinforcing and building of this cradle around the chair. And then, of course, this wonderful uniform from Star Trek Continues from the Mirror episode. Our wardrobe team did a most amazing job replicating these costumes and these pieces, even down to the details from other people online that just make amazing replicas. And if you look to your right, you'll see Captain Kirk's formal dress uniform. Now, what's special about that is this braid, this, I should call it trim, this gold trim does not exist anymore. But my good friend Dave Arland, who worked on our series, actually had several yards of it custom made. So he allowed us to use that much of it for the uniform for our 7th episode. And if you look behind all of these costumes, this is not a painting. This is our actual bridge from Star Trek Continues. This is a photograph of our bridge, and this is exactly what you would have seen had you looked behind Captain Kirk's chair. Over here, I forgot to mention too, my good buddy Will Smith built this. This is exactly Spock's computer on the bridge. And what I mean by that is the light sequence is exactly the way Spock's computer lit up in the original series. And Will made that and gave me one, and I love it, love it, love it. You guys remember Viewmaster? You can't look through here, but if you could, it's Star Trek Continues pictures. Someone made a Viewmaster with Star Trek Continues images. What an honor. It's so humbling, so humbling. There was a company back in the 60s called Burke, and they used to make these plastic molded chairs. Nothing fancy, mid-century modern. And they were all over the ship in Star Trek, and they had leather backings on them, just like this. And Burke made this chair too, but you see it has arms. This was in Captain Kirk's quarters. Most of the chairs, the Burke chairs, did not have arms. They were all over the bridge and they were all over the briefing room. But the one in Captain Kirk's quarters did have arms. And so I have that one as well. Now, this may be one of the favorites of all. Obviously, it's the Enterprise, but you can see by me standing by it, this is a 7-foot replica of the Enterprise. And what's even cooler is that it was 3D printed in sections based on the model that our wonderful Mark Bell used in Star Trek Continues. Mark Bell is an amazing VFX artist and was our supervisor in the series, and he sent his CGI model to have it 3D printed and made into this 7-foot replica. The last uniform that I wore in the series over here was the Admiral's uniform, and we had this podium actually physically made in Los Angeles so that I could actually stand behind it and give the final speech to the crew. And the rest of it was green screened, of course, but we actually did build the podium. So if you take one more quick pan around the room, that's all the Star Trek stuff across 3 walls, right? And if you keep panning, you end up on the last wall, which is my Star Wars wall. Okay, I love Star Wars. Nothing touches Star Trek, but Star Wars was really awesome. And when it came out, I was most fascinated with the lightsabers. I absolutely love the lightsabers. So if you come on in a little closer, this is a collection of lightsabers from all different movies. But let's just kind of focus right here. This is the original Luke lightsaber. Now, some of you may or may not know, but the original, again, Star Wars, when they were making Star Wars, they didn't have a lot of money. And they were cutting corners everywhere, using found items to save money. You know what this was? This was actually a Graflex flash unit. Remember in the old days when you'd see photographers with cameras? They'd be holding this and they'd go, hey, look over here. There would be a bulb right here. And this clamp would slide down on the side of the camera. And this was a flash unit for old 40s cameras. So all the creators of Star Wars did was they bought one of these Graflex units. They put a calculator bubble plate in the clamp, and then they cut windshield wipers and glued them to make hand grips. Now, for years, nobody made really accurate replicas of these sabers. And I remember I was 17, 18, 19, and I wanted to build one for myself. I tried my best. It's somewhere. That lightsaber is still somewhere. I can't find it. But then a company called Icons came out with this, and we were all so excited. But when I got it, I'm like, wow, it's so light. It doesn't feel like a weapon. And these grips, you see how they're glossy? They shouldn't be glossy, right? If they were grips, they would probably be rubber, to hold on to, and they have a flat finish. So, I bought a second Icons lightsaber. And in Empire Strikes Back, the second movie, Mark Hamill, who played Luke Skywalker, complained that these grips were constantly falling off. So you know what they did? They literally cut little chunks out of them and they just riveted them into the body of the thing so they wouldn't fall off. And then in Empire Strikes Back, they took out the calculator plate and they put in a circuit board. And then if you look closely, you see that this has a knob here, but not here. They added another knob on the bottom for Empire Strikes Back, just to make it a little different. And they put a chrome piece of tape around here. You know why? Because on the original it said Graflex right around there. Like you could see it on screen if you look closely. But what I did was I bought a second one of these to make an Empire Strikes Back version. And I wish you could hold this, because while I cast these grips, I bought silicone, I popped one of these off, and I made a mold of it. And then I cut the little notch out like it needed to be. And then I poured rubber and made these grips. They feel like real grips, and they're flat. And while I had them off, there are little holes that the back of these grips go into. And while I had access to this tube, I poured epoxy glue into the hole, and then I poured BBs, like a BB gun, inside. And I went like this and spread them around. And I wish you could hold this. It feels like a real weapon. And then on to Luke's sabers in Return of the Jedi. Obi-Wan Kenobi saber from the original, very first movie. Again, you don't have a lot of money, so you know what they did? You know what this actually is? This piece right here was a burner from a gas stove. This section from here to here, it's a British hand grenade. Recognize this? In fact, look, Graflex. This piece, this clamp, was exactly from the Graflex. This was a gear from a Rolls-Royce engine, and this was a sink knob. So you see, they didn't have any money to design anything new. Notice the difference between this, and this is Mace Windu's saber from a later episode. Now they had money, and they designed lightsabers. But in the originals, they didn't have any money, so they had to just build them out of found pieces. Same with Darth Vader's saber. If you go down here further, these are Vader's sabers from the first movie and Empire and Return of the Jedi. This is actually a resin casting of the real saber from the first movie, and this was a replica that was made. But this also was a flash unit for a camera. They just used found pieces. And then, of course, the top we have like different Jedi Knights. These two pieces put together are Darth Maul's. You remember his. This is Qui-Gon's, if you remember him. The Emperor, of course, Kylo Ren, Yoda. And this is the lightsaber from Rey, who obviously was patterning after Luke's lightsaber, clearly, right? With a couple of just minor changes. Look, they even did some like battle damage on it, which is kind of interesting. And somebody along the way made these. Which is kind of fun. You don't want to hit them together. Over here, now this is the crown jewel of my lightsaber collection now. All of these are mass-produced, pretty much. This one, when episode 1 was announced, 20-some years after the original Star Wars, I saw a picture on Premiere Magazine of Ewan McGregor standing there like this as young Obi-Wan Kenobi. And that wasn't what got me. What got me was there was a brand new lightsaber hanging from his belt. And I'm like, oh my gosh, look, it's a new lightsaber. Clearly I love lightsabers, right? So I hired a machine shop in Houston to custom cut this. This is surgical grade stainless steel. And what's amazing about it is that every time I would find out a new detail, like for instance, when we found out that inside this little knurled piece was a purple dome, we added it. And when we found out that, see these squares around the back, we got a certain angle and we saw that they had holes in them. I took it back to the guy at the shop and he put holes in them. This is a beautiful piece. I've been offered an awful lot for this piece, but this is one of a kind. And it's something that I'm very, very, very proud of. In the original, you might find this kind of fun. In the original Star Wars, the sabers just hung off the belt by a D-ring, basically, right? Well, in all of the prequels, they decided that that was just a little too simple. This is called a CoverTech clip. I think they're pretty common back then. They were pretty common in the UK. But you see how they work? All of the prequel sabers had these little attachments on them, and they had these on their belts, and that's how they connected the sabers in the prequels. Of course, you can't miss Han Solo's blaster. Some beautiful little pieces here that my friend Jeff gave me. Remember the dice hanging from the Millennium Falcon? And of course, the award that Princess Leia presented Luke and Han with at the end. And then, of course, helmets, Stormtrooper, Vader, Boba Fett, and of course, Boba Fett's rifle close to his helmet. And the only thing missing from this collection that I'm still waiting for is right here. There's a Stormtrooper blaster coming. So it'll be right here by the Stormtrooper. So that's it. That's my collection. In fact, when you came in, I think you even saw the glass disc on the floor. Again, how do you save money? You use things that already exist. And you know what that is? It's a Fresnel lens for a big movie light. And that's what they stood on in the transporter room. And that is a replica of the piece on the top, the emitter that was on the ceiling for each one of them. So that's about it. I think we've covered most of it, and you might have even fallen asleep by now. But thank you so much for letting me share this with you. I would be remiss not to end our little tour by live long and prosper.